Wonderful. And I will talk to the audience in Chinese a bit to let them know that we have the real-time translation. 好，大家好，非常感谢大家来到今天 Patrik 的讲座那么 Patrik 是知名的建筑师，然后以及是扎哈哈迪的建筑事务所的负责人。嗨，然后呢，我们这一次的会议是实时转写的，所以大家可以在实时转写框里看到我们的这个文字英文和中文的翻译那么非常感谢大家。那么接下来let's welcome Patrik.
Hi there. Okay, great, wonderful. Thank you so much, Yimeng, for inviting me. I'm excited to talk about fashion, something we're very involved in. I mean, we are architects, but we're designers, and all designers, including fashion designers, graphic designers, furniture and interior and industrial designers, we're all one group, one discourse, one discipline, in my view. And now we all together also transferred to the metaverse, and we continue to be designers there and colleagues in developing that. So I prepared some visuals, and I might talk about an hour or so, and then I hope we can still have some time to discuss. I also welcome Shiqi, who used to work and study with me, so welcome. And okay, so I would like to start by sharing my screen. Let's see if that works out. Yeah, let me see if that will come through. Now, can you see this grid of images?
Yes.
How about now? Oh, is it now a one image large?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's good. So we can keep going like this. So I'm calling this talk The Fashion of Society, and it's a critique of fashion design from the perspective of its societal function. So there is a bit of sociology, but I will also show design and discuss my current ideas about design, which includes fashion design. But first of all, I want to remind ourselves that, Yimeng, you have been a very wonderful show at Metotopia or Metaverse, where you're showing in full 3D, appreciable, a lot of your fashion design for the Metaverse or digital. And you've given a talk, which was very nice. And one of your professors, I think, was also there to give a talk. So these are just some glimpses into our Metaverse, where we were looking at your work, and later on we all gathered in the gallery and appreciating these wonderful dresses. And they're still there, and one of the highlights still of Metotopia, and you can see here there's also quite a lot of architecture, and by the way, also industrial design. Now Ross Lovegrove is here, etc. in Metotopia. Your videos can be appreciated, and you can really learn about your work and a lot of other designers' work. So Metotopia is for all design disciplines, including fashion design. But you are our first fashion designer in full force at Metotopia. But fashion, obviously, we all are consumers of fashion. We all need not only to look good, we need to look the way we want to express ourselves, the way we want to fit ourselves into a, let's say, system of distinctions. We want to show what we might be about, who we are affiliating with, how do we see ourselves, and how we see ourselves fitting into society. All of that comes through our choices of fashion items, so the way we dress, including hair, do, and makeup. So Zaha was always very self-conscious about not only what she would put out with respect to her designs, but how she wanted to look and be understood. So there's a number of great images, and of course she loved, when she became famous, Japanese designers were the hottest thing, Issey Miyake, etc. So she kept using his works, and we've been connected with fashion, and we did fashion stores around the world in various cases. And Zaha was close, obviously, and we were close to a number of fantastic fashion designers like Karl Lagerfeld, and we did the Chanel Pavilion, etc. So we connected, and again, Zaha always wants to look fabulous and special and different and you also, not only are you presenting your personality through your fashion, but also you do it perhaps a little bit differently at different occasions. So you also fit into temporary situations by dressing up for these, and that's very important. And some of these dresses have been especially designed for her by, for instance, Mucha Prada, who was a close friend. So so this was part of fitting. I mean, it's not only for celebrities. I guess we all have to do this. But Zaha was very close to a number of fashion designers, as we discussed. And I just wanted to show this, not to show off. I also was, inspired by Zaha's model, but these are designs of Rui Xu, who I think used to be head of CAFA fashion design, like Yimeng is now. And so he's a wonderful coach he designed and gave me. And these are unique pieces and a kind of interesting dress. And I'm in the studio of Rui, who now lives in London. So we're also aware of Chinese fashion designers, and they bring something special to the table. So we had, in our gallery, we had a number of fashion shows of Rui Xu's work, but also we had shows for Central St. Martin fashion class. And I think it was wonderful occasions to see these works. And our buildings have been appreciated by fashion designers, particularly, of course, the Seoul Dongdaemun exhibition center and plaza, where they actually have annual Korean Seoul Fashion Week. They had also major events like Chanel fashion, etc. So I just wanted to show this, and I've designed some suits, and we're doing furniture. And I just want to show one thing I've designed where I'm trying to dissociate the pieces. What is a vest, what is a jacket, and suit a little bit in a different way. So we have a vest with a zipper, and then the final dress comes on top, and there's a different so this seems to be belonging together, but I can lift this off and have a bit of a play of pieces and parts and different fabrics and seaming in a suit I designed. We also, and I'll show you later, another piece I've designed I'm using. We also been working with Lacoste. We've been working with Melissa with various shoe designs. Adidas together with Pharrell Williams. We've been working with United Nude. Actually, he's the nephew of Rem Koolhaas, the great architect. He is living and working in Hong Kong, and we designed these shoes for his sequence as a 3D printed shoes. I got involved in designing a collection for swimwear. This is also a Chinese friend of mine who's been launching this for us. And this got some kind of note as well. I mean, we're dabbling. So this was one of the swimsuit I think is quite beautiful. And it got some attention. It got some kind of publications. So we've been dabbling in your worlds. And I think we're all designers, and we love crossing these disciplinary boundaries, because in the end, it's all one function within society, articulating social relations, articulating social situations. That is my thesis, what we're sharing between architecture, furniture design, product design, and fashion. Been working with Louis Vuitton, with Fendi, and also jewelry was of interest to us. And, working for watches, for instance, this is the watch we designed for Will.i.am. and more jewelry with a wonderful brand called George Jensen, who is, by the way, is also now Chinese owned. So the Chinese friends of ours have been very important in various domains of design, not only our architectural work, also our fashion and jewelry work. So now, why am I showing this? I just want to say, this idea of self-transformation, of artistic expression, inverted commas artistic, is a human universal. There's no human society, no people on the planet in the history of Homo sapiens without using some decoration or dress and self-transformation, expressive self-transformation. It's absolutely a universal condition for mankind. And we need to understand, why is that? Because our closest relatives, the primate families, they don't have any of that whatsoever. So what is happening here? Why is it universal in mankind and is not existing in the animal kingdom? And one of my argument is that these kind of design efforts are a fundamental part of becoming human, of differentiating a more complex social order, of having larger groups interact so that they can differentiate social roles and mark out these social roles. Because one of the key points, and I'm dwelling on this, to this day, but also at that time, if you look at the amount of work which goes into these manipulations, sometimes also a lot of pain because it involves tattooing and, we still do that, piercings and, transformations, but a lot of careful work. And if this wasn't the life necessity, a survival necessity, this investment wouldn't make sense. So it is an absolute, I'm emphasizing the functionality. For the society to function, there must be these kind of design overlay, because otherwise you would not be able to navigate and orient and cooperate within larger groups beyond the kind of groups which you find in primates. So that's very important insight, and you can see this could be quite extreme. And so this is about differentiating social roles and structuring cooperation in a social order supported by, on the one hand, spatial ordering, and I show that, but also morphological marking. That's what we do through the self-transformation, but also these ornamental markings are also attaching to our buildings and to our instruments and furniture, etc. But I also want to maybe just go back one more point. If you look at the beginnings of this, you can see here that protection of the body, meaning keeping yourselves warm or otherwise protecting, is not the topic, the primary topic of dress. Because here you see there is none of that. And that's where human society evolved in Africa. It is only about expressing social roles, status, maybe occasions, you go out to war. And then these graphic systems, they also were applied to the habitat itself, the architecture, the build forms. Okay, so building or architecture's most profound contribution is the ordering of society through spaces, but also, I would say, dresses and fashion design's most profound contribution is the ordering of society, meaning expressing the order, hierarchy, relationships of clan, family, rank, profession, all of that is expressed in dress. So how is building an architecture achieving this? Via, in the architectural case, there are 2 dimensions, separation, connection, so the spatial ordering, but there's also strong element of visual communication in that. And with respect to dress and fashion, it is only visual communication by which the social ordering is supported. All design is communicating and is a form of communication. So, and social order requires spatial and semiological order. And the fashion systems, let's call them, or dress codes, are a fundamental part of this. So we use space, and again, there is no human community without artificially created and built up settlement structures, because they allow that social order to expand, to build up over generations. So you can order people, order activities, so everybody can come together and understand and navigate the social system, particularly when it becomes bigger. And that's been from the most ancient settlements to the most primitive tribes, this kind of structure of the city is building up. And in a way, the social organism, the social body, the body politic, like in a political theory like Hobbes, he says, where many, many people coordinate and cooperate like a whole body, in a functionally structured and articulated body. In reality, that's a metaphor up here, but this is the real social body. It is embedded in the architecture, but then again, the architecture has a graphic, ornamental, expressive overlay, which is absolutely fundamental for the social functioning. You find that, of course, these kind of spatial structures are required to have, you know, here an administrative headquarters for an empire. And again, we have structuring situations with space, but also with the human figures being populating this in particular zones, in particular situations and roles. And they are recognizably, of course, we emphasize male versus female, but also using other elements and aspects, of course, to make a strong distinction between the different roles. And the same, you've got 2 things, the spatial demarcations of zones of action and dress code, team A, team B, different from the referee. The goalkeeper, again, has a different role and different rules than the other players. And that's the way you get an ordered, cooperative, social interaction underway. And the similar you could say in a game like chess, you have to obviously express in the form of the chess piece the social role or the moves it can make and how it enters a game. But then how you express that system of differences, there's a lot of variety. There's an open-endedness about how you articulate a system of differences, and that's important. All that matters is that the full system of differences you have in society or in a game is somehow expressed morphologically, maybe with sufficient conspicuity. So but otherwise there's an arbitrariness in the dress code as long as the differences are marked. So we have to always think about differences. But we also been looking at ordering then the social organizations, not just on a grid always, but we have other architectural figures which configure and relate the human figure, which then fit where they would like to fit, and not everybody can slot in everywhere. Even in a social event, there are different roles, the host, guests, people who are serving, etc. And they're often marked out by uniforms. So this idea of a uniform and of a functionally expressive and a dress expressing a function is very typical and very important. You see that as well. In Chinese theater, you have these masks and there's some kind of graphic representation, some grammar even And this was some studies students of mine did when I was teaching at Harvard, and I was teaching about semiology, that there are certain meanings attached to it, and you can have a kind of relatively complex set of meanings expressed just through facial markings. There's a certain system there. And again, we have this going on throughout the centuries. And I'm inviting you to look at contemporary fashion in that perspective. And we will get to that. So what we're seeing here is different status groups, the clergy versus the gentry versus the common people. And within the nobility, of course, there's an enormous amount of gradation in classical or in traditional society, which was very particular. In these cases, a lot of these were not so arbitrary. They were originally arbitrary when they evolved, but very strictly observed. But you have similarly, we have individualization and marking out of buildings with different functions in the city. The town hall is different from the church, etc. And therefore, we have this kind of social order requiring that spatial and semiological order to recognize everybody, to have places for everything, but also everybody is dressed up for a certain occasion, for certain function. That's non-arbitrary. And of course, as we move from the Middle Ages into modernity, the investment in dress and decoration, so the same applies, is not only, instead of making very stripped bare spaces which just contain and shelter, there's an enormous investment in ornamental heightening, and similarly into dress. So the amount of, starting with the African tribes, the amount of investment which goes into this is a measure of its significance, of its existential necessity and vitality, where tribes who were very poor, always on the edge of starvation, nevertheless make an enormous effort of work and detail and learning into maintaining these systems of dress code. But also in a place like this, these dresses are incredibly expensive, incredibly valuable, and yet necessary. That's why the investment comes through. So it's of an enormous amount of importance, and to still this day. I mean, I remember, in terms of Zaha was not a poor lady, but a large segment of her income went into fashion. And I think that still goes for many people. It's a significant segment. And that's not about staying warm. You continuously upgrade and refine and evolve your wardrobe, and that costs you as much as your food or more. So that's where the significance is. And it's not just wanting to look good. It's not just appeal in mating and partner selection. It's a general social self-expression and fitting. And this was so important at the time when society evolved out of very strict hierarchically ordered conditions and became more fluid. In the 18th century, for instance, the dress code had to be reinforced by law, so-called sumptuary law. There were permitted clothing, but also foods and other luxury expenditure that didn't allow people who were not of a certain rank socially of the nobility. Maybe they were tradespeople, earned a lot of money. That wasn't allowed to be expressed in luxurious jewelry or dress, because that would be seen of violating that would be seen as an imposter faking a status, and would undermine the truth content, the informational content of this system of dress. Going back to the African tribes, you can see here the enormous amount of investment, and you can see here both space and dress and the decoration of buildings is the semiological structuring of a social order. Things like a throne or like royal dress are very important. And you find that throughout history in all societies, and the only place where it's in the strict form still exists is in the, particularly in England, Americas do, in the law, codes of law, a very strict ordering of space with different groups and different functions placed, and they're all dressed up in a particular way. This is the UK Supreme Court in session. And, you know, and just to say it, so modernism was trying to say, well, we don't need ornament. They said ornament is crime. They said, well, you know, look at these primitive African peoples, they're ornamenting themselves. We won't do that. We don't have to do that. They're thinking of criminals tattooing themselves. No, that's kind of primitive and backward. So ornament is crime or belongs to criminals and primitive. So we strip our architecture bare of all ornament. I think there was a fallacy in not understanding the existential function of ornament. So just in terms of semiology, there's, you know, not only do you have dress, but how you open or close your dress, there's an interaction, how you use your fan has a social meaning. There's a whole expressive, there's a whole visual language attached to this, for instance, in Cuba. But also we have to look at historically, ideals of beauty transform, and of course the ways we dress up transform. And that is aligned with the way architecture, of course, changes. And it sometimes is also on the expressive side, of course, also representing new technology, representing a new era. If you want to be future-oriented, forward, modern, you have to express yourself. Functionally, these three designs are still quite similar. They're villas, they're single-family houses, if you like. But the expressiveness changed dramatically. And I think what we need to understand is that these outward styles of, for instance, architecture, I obviously know more about architecture. I looked at this, like the Renaissance, the Baroque. I mean, it starts, let's say, before was the Gothic, which was aligned to feudalism. It wasn't a proper architectural style. It wasn't so self-conscious. But let's say starting with out of feudalism into the Renaissance, Baroque, historicism of the 19th century, modernism of the 20th century, parametrism of the 21st century, they're aligned with certain eras. It's not just time moves on and fashions change or styles change. There are certain moments of transformation when the socioeconomic system transforms from early capitalism to mercantilism and absolutism, then the French Revolution, and you have bourgeois capitalism and the nation state. Then you have modernism, the socialist revolutions, in fact, and new technologies of the assembly line. You have Fordism in the 20th century, and then you have, again, not a revolution, but a momentous transformation from Fordism to what I call post-Fordist network society, just based on computational technologies, on robotics, on software updates. So these are different sociologically and socioeconomic eras, and we need to understand design transformations in this respect. So if you just look at some simple history of fashion, you could just look at all this as an endless sequence, continuously transforming. One thing we note here, though, is that it accelerates. So here in a few decades, you have as much as a few hundred years, how many changes we have. But also, it's interesting that they use these phrases, Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque, Rococo. These are also the styles of architecture. Here, there's a little bit of different phrases, and they slip into 20s, 30s, 40s, because this is all modernism in architecture, for instance, all the way up to here. So they just go by decades suddenly. But I've looked at this more closely, just in terms of, And then, of course, in each category, like medieval, and more in the other category, in other periods, you have, of course, a whole differentiation of the status groups, and the variety and things to be distinguished become their increase. Okay, going back, so if you go from medieval, Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque, I was saying the major transition is the transition from feudalism to capitalism, with the Renaissance, the early Italian city-states, and then to the Baroque is less dramatic. It's still capitalism. It's a form of capitalism, but it's something bigger. It's the Louis XIV, the large nation state. They need a different aesthetic to express their huge building like Versailles or the Vatican, a kind of European-wide empire with St. Peter's. They have a different, the Baroque, large columns, deep reliefs, big symmetry out of asymmetry, expressing something new. And then you can then go also into the detail of these richer period past the medieval, because the early phases of capitalism. But again, we need to look at particular transitions, and you can see here that there is some transformation, but the bourgeois revolutions, the French Revolution, the Glorious Revolution in England, that's where you have a dramatic shift. These are quite different. If you look at the men from the period of the Ancien Regime before and after the revolution. There's also, of course, an upset of the class structure. Here it was always aristocratic fashion, and the bourgeoisie had no fashion. And suddenly the bourgeoisie becomes itself the carrier of the new fashion. So this is the thing we should look at. So we have bourgeois capitalism, the nation state, and there is a strong situation here, and you can see that that's the social revolutions, and as well as where machines come into the city. It's not so much separated. Workers and an industry doesn't belong to the city, doesn't belong to society. They become part of society, and you have a major transition here from basically the watershed of the First World War and the revolutions thereafter. So in 1918, you start to have the modern world. This is modernism in architectural terms. And you have, building up to this, you have actually the reform dress movement, where it also connects with feminism and the emancipation of women. They also want to go out in the city. They want to ride bicycle, maybe later drive a car. And they're saying these kind of hugely ornamental things and the hugely kind of very tightening of the waist and huge dresses, that's being rejected, and it becomes more practical. It becomes more, that's part of this transition into modernity in the end of the 19th century and 20th century. These are highly significant social transformation. And you can see this is the pre-modern, the early modern period around 1910. And the architecture of that period, I mean, the most advanced fashion, the most advanced architecture, and they were connected. So we have the early modernist fashion designers were sometimes the wives of the architects. And this idea of a white modernism also comes through. This idea of white dresses, it's clean, it's hygiene, it's stripped bare. The white modernism we all know about started with the white dresses and the also more functional, the idea of functionalism, which we associate with architecture, white functionalism, starts in the reform dress movement. So the dress codes and, very consciously reformers, like the early architects were consciously social reformers, so were the fashion designers, a certain subgroup which became important in that period. And that's the way Le Corbusier looked in 1907. We're still not in the 20s. And this is the way he looked. And Eileen Gray, the furniture designer, in the 1920s. So there's yet another shift. and that's really becomes super contemporary if you think about it. When we now look at this, so sometimes there is, and if you look at something in the 19th century, seems alien, but within a space of 20 years and through the revolutions, the First World War, social revolutions, you get something dramatically contemporary. So 100 years ago, we were at this stage, and doesn't feel 100 years ago. So you know, you have history accelerating overall, but also there are certain moments of rapid transformation, revolutionary transformation, then moments where things stay maybe the same. They're not. And this is the buildings of Le Corbusier from the 1920s. And they look dramatically contemporary compared to the car, if you see. They look like spaceship from another world compared to the cars, which obviously were, we don't recognize as being so dramatically modern. So, because this architecture, which was developed in the 1920s, really went around the world only in the 1950s, 60s. So that's why it feels so strangely, we couldn't hardly believe that this is 100 years ago. Okay, and the characters. It is interesting, now we're looking at the modernist fashion and self-expression, but of course there is differences in each era, they become more subtle and more expressed. These are the architects. And there's a difference between, you know, Walter Gropius, the director of the Bauhaus, who was also an entrepreneur and was more mixing with the big politicians and business people. And then people like Hannes Meyer, who was a socialist, a working class oriented teacher. Anyway, but these are the architects. And the artists, you can see they drift off. There's a strong differentiation between the artists who also use self-expression and work on themselves to self-transform. These are some of the surrealists. Anyway, so I want to also show you that is modernism, the Bauhaus. These are the students at the Bauhaus 100 years ago. And they, you know, that sounds looks incredibly familiar. So what has actually changed? Something has changed. We went through another transformation, and we'll look at that. But this was in the 1920s at the Bauhaus. And this is the architecture of the Bauhaus and the furniture of the Bauhaus, etc. So it's quite remarkable. And the era you know, the high fashion of the advanced avant-garde fashion of the 1920s, dramatically different, obviously, from the 19th century. And this, you know, Chanel was already up and running with her costumes. You can still wear them now. And this was the era of mass production, of what I call Fordism, assembly line, industrial society, industrialization, and for everybody in a large nation, industrial products become available: the car, the house, packaged holiday, the washing machine, the TV set, etc. Okay, so we have what I'm talking about in terms of the dress code in that era, the modernism. There's a dramatic shift in the 70s into the 80s. I mean, it starts actually in the late 60s, the free love revolution, the student revolution, not society as general. You look at the early mid 60s, people were very, very controlled, very, very, you know, restrained and stereotyped, particularly the men. 10 years later, men having hairs like this long and ripped up jeans and tattooed and jewelry. I mean, I'm not going to tell you too much, but it's dramatic, the difference within one decade. And then we're going to this new era where there's a huge increase in individualization, in degrees of freedom, which you can also express like this. So, because also in the era of modernism, you had socialist countries where there was the stereotyping, this mass production, this mass mentality, and egalitarian kind of expression, collectivism. And then you go into this new era of reinvigorated post-Fordist capitalism. And you get this enormous amount of subjective expression, also so many career opportunities, so many different lifestyles and opportunities. So there you get this huge spectrum. And again, there is, you know, even in contemporary condition, there is this kind of within not only the expressing your personality, but different occasions, let's say from the more formal, from the white or black tie to the kind of business attire, into the casual. So there's, for different occasions, you can put on a spectrum from highly casual to highly formal. And then there's all these different professions and characters, engineers, architects, artists, bankers. All of that needs to be expressed. But also individually, this idea of continuous self-transformation, which was marked out by Madonna, who had to reinvent herself every few years. And that was part of the idea of self-expression, multiple faces, continuously evolving faces, etc. And for that to take off, there's need to be enormous amount of new fashion design coming in all the time so that people can pick up and find these self-expressions. And that's where also you get a lot of a second-hand fashion culture when the young people don't have the purse and ability to buy. They go out and go to second-hand stores and mix and match and generate outfits. I was doing this when I was a student in my early 20s as well. So, but again, I would say there's a difference between, you know, architects and artists. Maybe the avant-garde architect sits between, but there's a difference between a Norman Foster and a Bjarke Ingels, but also in artists like Damien Hirst. So these things need to be kept in mind. So finance, design, my friend Lars Rafkov, science, they're always super casual and don't care about any of the appearance, so it seems. And again, architects, we have some kind of never a tie, but always kind of mostly black. And that's different from the designer. So we are very close friends and we're working with industrial designers. They're similar to artists. Why is that? Because we have to meet investors. We have bigger investments to handle. So we have to have more sense of trust and less sense of, but we also still have to have a sense of creativity because we want to give them an artistic solution to our investors, but we can't look like, and so we have to play that game. We have to mix and match and look serious and have something special, a twist, and so on. And that's what I've all tried in my own suit designs. But, you know, we're not Rolf Lovegrove with long white hair and earring, and that maybe goes too far. So the industrial designers look different. And that's what we're catering for. And maybe when fashion designers generate their stuff, I don't know how conscious they are of who they're catering for and what spectrum they're addressing and catering. So self-expression via self-sorting. If you dress up, you sort yourself, you align yourself with people you want to be part of, you want to be similar to, and you want to be seen to be part of, into an expanding and novelty consuming system of differentiations and distinctions. So these distinctions, they have to be continuously renewed, because as a certain group of avant-garde architects or entrepreneurs who are hip, who want to stand out, since more and more people copy them and follow them, they have to come up with something new. So there's a continuous requirement of novelty, of recycling. There's a kind of moral consumption of the repertoire, and a continued, even when you have society standing still, let's say these major differentiations and new dynamics of society since the post-Fordism revolution, let's say since the 1980s into the 90s, that's relatively stable, but fashion has to kind of keep updating these distinctions, the same distinctions. Like, you know, the distinction system stays the same, but we need to continuously, to maintain it, we need to update it. So individuality, your own individuality, emerges in modern society as each is defined by a unique intersection of multiple social circuits adhered to simultaneously. So you're not just an architect, you are kind of avant-garde architect who is mixing a lot with artists and collaborating with artists, but you also have some, you know, or you have an architect who has more of a kind of a PhD and is more mixing with a scientist and research and an academic. So that, you know, and then you have, but also you have You have you want to be more future oriented. Somebody else wants to be more conservative. So there's many alignments, many intersecting dimensions, which you have to calibrate. And then you have to find these hybrids, these mixings, these kind of nuances, because there's so many dimensions intersecting in your personality. That's why you need a huge, let's say, repertoire to choose from, to find where you have the right balance of your scientific, future-oriented, designerly self-identity. And then you have to do that for several occasions, because when you go out at night, maybe you want to, it's something else you want to express. So you accumulate a huge wardrobe to make it clear for everybody who you are, because that you have to communicate this, otherwise we couldn't navigate. You go to a crowd, you go to a party, you go to an event, you need to be able to appraise immediately, who is this character, would I have something in common with them, can we talk? And of course, that's the dress code. It's also, of course, your hairdo, etc. Okay, and I don't want to read too much, but Georg Simmel, sociologists have been knowing about this and writing about this, and this is, over 100 years ago. The famous German sociologist Georg Simmel wrote an article on fashion, the philosophy of fashion, and it's about class characteristics. It's the expression of the individuality, and the theory of individuality I was just mentioning is Simmel's. It's the intersection of many affiliations. It's not something unique. It's something, an intersection of collectivities which generates individuality. Okay, dress code. I mean, it's a semiological system, so you can combine some hat, some wisdom pieces, as you know, the shoes. You can kind of counteract what you're doing with your suit with the shoes, and then you add something with your watch. So you need to also, through combination, you can make complex, and then you have an overall more nuanced statement. And again, you have a whole range within your wardrobe, but this is just a cross-section through one person's wardrobe. My wardrobe would be very, very different. I have none of that in my wardrobe. And here again, and of course, all of what I'm saying applies to the metaverse. The metaverse I'm interested in, and this is fashionably metaverse fashion week, so all of this is happening in the metaverse. Metaverse I'm thinking about is not a kind of escape, a dream, a play field, but professional. We have Metatopia, we have professional conferences, we have work and edutainments, we have universities will have in the metaverse. So you have whatever your problems and issues you have of expressing yourself in the real world, this will also happen in the metaverse. And I don't think you want to be necessarily suddenly be unrecognizable. You still want to, it still should function as an information system. Fashion system, a spontaneously evolving semiological system, which is a language, a visual language, an information carrying system. So, okay, so that was the first part of this lecture. And now I'm just going to go through the way we work in contemporary and how fashion might be influenced by contemporary architecture. And this is tectonism, an architecture which has I'm emphasizing two things, a huge expansion of the repertoire of architecture, and this could also be interesting for fashion, and a way of developing this repertoire which isn't just arbitrary colors, patterns, but comes out of technical functionality and technical innovations. So I have some books about this. This is not talking about fashion, but my first lecture on tectonism was also in connection with fashion, by the way, somewhere on YouTube. It was actually in China, in Xiamen, architecture and fashion kind of conference. So you can see here, compared to older forms of parametricism, that you have many more global forms with particular forms and particular patterns and different materials and fabrication logics coming in. And this was the previous era of parametricism, very different old geometries and forms, but it's all white, gray, not many patterns, smooth surfaces. So tectonism is much richer, and that's the latest phase of parametricism. It's the stylistic heightening of engineering and fabrication-based form finding and optimization processes. And you can go back, make the Gothic inside out. It is not only compression, it's tension, compression, and variation. So the continuous variation of elements instead of repetition is a major feature. And this kind of differentiation of a network, a fabric for different parts of the space, maybe different parts of the body. So these should be inspirational for your fashion. And the overall form has also something to do with the structure. But it's a lot of it's asymmetric and highly varied. And yet then there's a rational logic of how to tessellate this. And there's computational tools of making these very intricate geometries. And I think this could be interesting for fashion designers to use some of these tools, tensile structures, and so I'm just going quickly to this tailoring, in fact, of tensile structures. There's a logic. These are minimal surfaces. There's minimizing stress. There's a lot of technical rationality. The shell form is a structurally optimized form. Then the patterning on top, the ribs, are also algorithmically optimized stress lines, reinforcement lines where the structural stresses move. And you get this organic beauty, and you get these kind of spaces. And something like this is an AI image for fashion. It could be inspiring for fashion. The methodology of working out of function. Remember the dress reform movement, the idea of functionality. And I want to design, I'll show later, stretch. Everything is stretchy. I want to have a suit which is breathing, which is elastic, which I can jog and appear in a business meeting. Anyway, so there's different structural logics. I don't go too much into this in detail, some of our works. And they become also ornamentally heightening. So they become expressive. You can do similar structural optimization. You can express them in different ways, the same structural pattern in different ways. That's where it becomes articulation, what you want to express. And you can express different characters, different situations, different types of event spaces with different of these shells with different patterns. And this way, it becomes semiology also. And I did this at the GSD and different, systems. And I think in the end, you can also combine these systems to have a more complex end result. Not everything homogeneous. There, you should have a variation within the system, but also multiple systems coming together. And that's not the case here. They're to become too monotonous, I believe. There are 3 different systems, highly differentiated internally. Maybe they should all be combined into one system. And again, we're looking at a number of processes, global form optimizations through mesh relaxation, running these algorithms of ribbing, topology optimization, and then to make something super light, super functional, we different thicken, different perforation, and you get something which is intricate, beautiful, organic, has a character. You can make one is do different colors, express stronger inside and outside, etc., etc. And we can do that with different forms. And sorry, repeating the thing with the towers. And there's so many opportunities, and these are intricate structures, and we can do the same now with knitting patterns, computational knitting patterns. We go to that in fashion. So, and there's also sun exposure logics. I'm going quicker of this. The richness of repertoires, not only structure but sun exposure. And I show you in dress, you also have various types of engineering criteria. This is breathing and sun protection. And this develops something which has logic. The wind flows in, the sun is protected. both with the hard shells and the soft shells. There's courtyards, etc. And fabrication, the whole world of fabrication you can also employ in fashion. 3D printing in various types, hot wire cutting, the ruled surfaces, conic surfaces, curved folding origami patterns, in sheet metal, active bending, elastic materials like timber, weaving of carbon fiber, also over an inflated structure, etc., etc. And there's a variety of similarities, a network of similarities and connections. And if you have all this manifold in a system of fashion where everybody is contemporary in this way, there's so much richness, like the endless form of nature, that there would be a lot of scope for individual expression out of that. We also did a fabric casting structure for a shell, concrete shell. And we used graphics to easier to knit this together and to show the flow of forces. And then we stretch this and we cast concrete over it. And so again, there's a whole universe of new productions and 3D printing, etc., where you can get color gradations. And I show this. And so when I started thinking about dressing, I wanted to do this hyper functional, inspired by sports clothes. And that was a big topic in recent years. Prada doing shoes together with Adidas and so on. So this jacket is super elastic, it's neoprene, it has thickness and it has a degree of warmth, perforations, so it's when I'm running, my back sweat is kind of has a chance to escape. Of course, zippers, zippers here too, and the inner texture is a white to allow to express this perforation, but it's also a net, just the kind of sport clothing net at the inner lining, not silk. And so I feel very comfortable. You can see the nice details of cutting this open, etc., etc. And that's something you wear with a white t-shirt or not with the tie. So certain grammar prevents you then from making kind of combinations. That doesn't combine with a black tie or with a tie, but it looks smart and sharp, tailored, and I can go to an evening black tie event with that, and that's what I've been doing. And you can see here the internal perforation. So that's my first attempt at a piece of, so I did this, I designed this and worked together with the New York fashion designer and tailor who did it for me. Now, after that, I said, wow, I want to do that. I want to go more. And so I made the relationship with a sportswear company, particular skiing underwear company and skiing outfits, Odlo. So we set up this relation with Odlo and we tried to say, okay, because they have been very high tech, and I will tell you more about what their conditions are, how they work. And when we did actually a collection for them. So body hugging, perforations. And again, what they're saying, these are scientific products, and that is part of their not only story, but also the generating and their aesthetics comes out of this. So there's movement management. So these things are elastic in the right places and stiff in other places. Temperature management, they're weaving in these kind of cooling fibers. And moisture management, perforation, not only perforation, but also thickening, like a towel-like thickening of the fabric to absorb moist and then to release it. So these are a bit like the kind of structural, environmental, and then on top of this fabrication logic. So the tectonism criteria could enter the fashion design. So we did this own it kind of sequence, and you can see you can wear it casually. It's coming out of sport, but doesn't necessarily stay in sport. Comes out of sport, and the product comes with a package describing the science. And there is a lot of this body hugging thing, but it becomes then also casual, different materials, and it becomes, we did the whole thing of different types. This is for skiing, but you can also wear it in the winter in Beijing, I suspect, and the cold wind is coming in. And sometimes only graphic. I would have loved to have more, knitting and perforations and structuring. but then you can heighten that with graphic. Heightening with graphic. Here you have the kind of, you know, gradient of density of building up the depth of the material for the sweat, elasticity in the right directions, and so on, so forth. So we get, you know, into these elements which look good and fit well, and different materials are tailored and so on. Look, it's just the beginning. It's not that I think we've nailed it. We would love to do much more, and so pullovers as well, and a show for them. And this is an outlook, you know, looking where you can learn from, you know, and you know, functional clothing, the kind of integration. It's similar to car design itself for a reason. Interior of a car, fitting different materials, soft, hard, fabric, acoustic, absorbent, etc., etc. So, and again, look at computational knitting. There's research papers for various topics, you know, allowing wind to blow into a fabric and organic or thickened, etc., etc. So this was the talk. I think it took roughly an hour, as promised. So maybe we can have a conversation about this.
Thank you, Patrik.
Let me see how I can. I don't know how I can stop this.
Yeah, you can stop the screen share.
Well, where is that? Wait, let me do something else.
It might be on the top of the screen. Yeah.
Here you are. Wait. New
Stop share. The right hand.
Yeah.
Stop share.
I can see it. Okay, great.
Yes, great. Thank you very much. And I was very inspired by the
Thank you.
Especially the knitting part, to use the parametric pattern in the knitting. It's not easy. So I'm very inspired. And
I know.
Yeah.
But are you interested in, you know, in functional features and you know, I mean, for instance, non-iron is another thing, which is wonderful with some of the easy stuff where you just throw your suit into a suitcase and out it comes. I mean, there's some of these things are also satisfying. This aesthetic and function in the harmonizing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a complex design, both in the aesthetics and the function. So I'm really into it. I will explore more after the lecture. Yeah. Yeah, it's a real interesting application. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I like the jacket that you designed with the hose.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
That's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, the jacket is great, and I've done this kind of, you know, 3-piece suit, which I think is also nice. Yeah, I would love to do more. I mean, if we can collaborate somehow, I mean, and do something, we're always up for that.
Yeah. Yeah, very nice lecture. I got a question for you.
Yes.
Yeah. In this era of AI, how do you think the fashion domain play its societal function, or the design domain?
Yeah, I mean, look, fashion, I mean, we've seen it in architecture. I'm sure in fashion it's going on even more. It's a great tool to explore ideas, to explore particularly the hybridization of different nuances and characters. You know, you want to, you know, the complexity of how you want to appear, all the things you want to affiliate with, allude to with a certain degree. You know, you want to say, okay, 70% design, but I have at least 10% science in there, and I want 5% art, and I want then, but then to shift that to 25% art when I go out, and then etc. I want more sexy, less sexy, etc. So that's AI is fantastic for this, and I think for the process of ideation, you know, where particular designer, particularly when you don't have, and we see that in architecture, what I'm showing in tectonism is difficult. You have to learn all these tools. You have to understand something about structure, etc. At least to know when to run all these plugins into Rhino and run Grasshopper, etc. Not everybody can do that. So there's a bit of a hurdle. But designers are not engineers necessarily. They are imagining things. They work in the visual, in the expressive fields. And if these tools, the AI tools, and we're now working on training tectonics into AI because at the moment that isn't possible.
Yeah.
But we're generating a lot of samples, and we have already done that. That was the studio we did also at Tongji earlier this year. Then I think it's very productive, very important that we get better design outputs and more variety. You also have to remember we have to update faster, particularly when it comes to metaverse. When it comes to metaverse, the cycles will be faster. There will be more variation, nuance, and AI is enormously important, I think, productivity and creativity booster for architects, but also for fashion designers. So I can recommend it to everybody. Of course, in the end, when it comes to real physical dresses or physical buildings, you have to actually translate, actually build, but there will also, of course, the tools will become available, 3D printing fabrics, or making materials which move all the way from stiff into super soft, chain link. I mean, there's an enormous world there. And I think, so it's not only, it's the algorithmic design which architecture has gone through in the last 20 years, that should be absorbed more into fashion. And AI is for the front ideation, I think, incredibly potent. So I can only recommend it to be used to develop your ideas. And then, of course, there's translation.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I've got a question. So we know that Metrotopia is a metaverse. And how do you imagine the mixed reality future? So do you think there will be some connection between the virtual world and the real world?
Yes. I think if we don't have that, then the metaverse could kind of become more and more different from the real world. First, but I think our lives will be continuing in the real world, in, let's say, the physical world. The metaverse is equally real as a social engaged space of interaction. So I believe and hope that there will be more, that we will enter the metaverse and join virtual environments, or that virtual participants can join physical events. That we do that more in spaces, not from home, but collectively. So let's be going maybe into a gallery or go to the office, and there's a group of people together physically, and then there is a huge panoramic screen where there's virtual extension of that space, where virtual participants can join, interact, speak as well, maybe some holographic presentation, let's say instantiation of a speaker, an important person. I also think there could be AR glasses overlays where we can bring in virtual visitors into physical. So if we mix these realities more, and I think to some extent, many events are now mixed. In our office, most meetings we have, there will be always some, because we have offices around the world, they will be partly virtual. We have big screens in the office. They will usually hybrid. Of course, not using metaverse, just using Zoom. But with the metaverse, with an extended space, you could do much more. You could mingle. You could have a better integration. So hybrid events, both in the university level, both on the level of interaction in companies, but also things like exhibitions, maybe in the future, social events, all these kind of chat spaces could mix and mingle. You have night clubbing in the metaverse, you have night clubbing in real. Why not combine them? That's what I hope, and I'd make it more satisfying. Otherwise, if we think about the metaverse taking over, then we're all sitting at home. I don't think that's what we want. I don't think that's realistic. And by the way, when COVID came to London and all the offices were closed, there was a period where they hadn't closed yet the bars, restaurants, and clubs. So while everybody was working from home and the city was quiet on that level, in the evenings, everybody came out and went to restaurants, clubs, bars, cafes, and so on. So there's a kind of urge just to be out in the social world. And yeah, so that's why I think when we design buildings and spaces for clients, we can make the digital twin. When we do a virtual space, we do it in ways which still can connect with physical spaces. And I guess the same thing would be in fashion. If I'm still having a life and some of the people I'm meeting virtually I also will meet and have met in the physical world, then there should be a connection. Of course, there will be a degree of emancipation, and we have these degrees of freedom we have in the metaverse, anti-gravity and easier ways of transforming. Maybe these dresses become more animate, they become more changing, they express our mood more real time than a physical dress could. But then again, this will also migrate back to the physical dresses, because I've seen some dresses which have kind of, where for instance, emotions are expressed through, let's say, instead of your fibers stand out if you get excited, Right. So there will be a confluence, I hope anyway, and it's definitely, I think the great, there should be those, there will be some metaverse only designers in fashion and architecture, but I think the better model is to be designing both in the physical world and in the virtual world, and that's great for all designers to be in both domains.
Great, thank you. And are there any other problems from the audience here? And we can maybe have one more question. Is there anybody wanna have a question? I will open the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Open it to everybody.
Yeah. Don't be shy. It's a very precious chance.
We can wait. We can wait. I know. We should wait. Somebody will come up.
What can fashion design criticism from the perspective of social function? Only criticize. How to criticize specifically? What can never be judged? What is the root cause? There is a question on the chat.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. So, I mean, basically, from the perspective of an intuitive fashion designer, they just generate material. And maybe they're not aware that this necessary. They just love what they do, and they're not aware how this might fit into a semiological system, let's say, into a spontaneously evolved semiological system. They don't make that explicit, they don't critique it. And that maybe is okay, that just generate more material. But I think what I sometimes criticize in fashion recently is there is not enough future orientation or not enough expressiveness, which is fresh and new also of our era, because of this, for instance, the use of more sophisticated technologies of fabrication, materiality, computational patterning to make it more heightened in its functional dimension, but also express more the 21st century so that it fits better, for instance, with this latest ideas in architecture and industrial design. In fashion, there is some of that, but it's very marginal. And what we see instead in fashion is too much cycling of retro styles, sort of folding the past back in, going back to the 80s or going back to the 70s, and that has a bit of a nostalgia in there, and it's I think if fashion was all contemporary oriented, if it had this repertoire expansion I'm talking about, then it doesn't need to go to make something new, go back, a few decades and recycle something for the third time or fourth time. That's I see slightly as a problem and limitation. Yeah, I think or if something is a lack of self-awareness, for instance, with respect to haute couture and experimental work, to understand that the meaning of that is to discover things which could be more generalized. So new stimuli, new forms of expression, maybe new technologies. And that's what interesting is somebody like also Iris van Herpen. Initially, these dresses are so expensive to make, they can only exist as an haute couture. But I don't believe that's the final destination. There's need to be kind of reflectiveness and in the critics of fashion to evaluate the seeds of something which could be more generally applicable, and not just a one-off, event, a piece of art, maybe one celebrity wearing it once, etc. So that's where I think, let's say, the sociological understanding and purpose of the whole fashion world, an awareness of that, how that might strategically empower a fashion designer to succeed, but also to contribute more. Because there's a kind of strategic innovation which allows also, maybe there's a new kind of group, a new kind of cast of character, a new personality type or occupational role, one might address. You can say they exist, but maybe how would I design for this group? How would I express what they're about with fresh material? Because they try it maybe themselves, because they're going into repertoire, they're going into the history. They seek out something, but they don't have anything which contemporary fashion gives them yet, right? So, for instance, maybe the crypto ecosystem or the digital nomad or some kind of characters. I don't know if you think like this in the fashion school, how you target and set up your studio themes, let's say. That would be also, let's say, maybe not so much there's a kind of critique, which is at the same time the kind of a suggestion for a more sociologically informed fashion design.
Yeah, thank you. And one more question from our student in the course. And can you see the chat, or I will read his question?
Wait, let me just open the chat to see if I can see.
Yeah. So
okay, I can see it. What? No, wait, where is it? Let me see. What here now. What are the root causes? Is that the one?
It's from the Heping. So you just mentioned that fashion and architecture as a modern discourse need to be constantly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's worried about the artificial intelligence will take over his job. Yeah.
Well, okay, so artificial intelligence is developing at an incredible pace, accelerating this process and making it easier, even to the point where we have no doubt that AI will produce even more innovative designs in the future. I mean, I don't know where this anxiety is coming from. Maybe there's a feeling that I'm studying fashion design and I'm investing a number of years, and now somebody, a lay person or somebody, an enthusiast using AI can kind of compete with me. If that's the worry, yes.
Yeah, people worry about it.
Huh?
Yeah, people worry about it.
Yeah, people are worrying about it, and there's nothing you can do on that. So our response was, and of course we get a lot of, first of all, making these dresses For the metaverse, it's easier for these pure visual things to just come through. In the real physical dressmaking, I wouldn't worry. That's where you need much more depth of understanding of the industry, of the materiality, of tailoring, of the engineering, of marketing, and all of that. You can't get AI kind of kits out competing you. But I think on the positive side, yes, this challenge should spur you to see what else you can do. Because one thing is clear, the AI can bring in a lot of inspirations, but it relies always on things which exist and recombination, but not mutation and original creation. So there's still something which certainly in architecture, like the tectonism thing, you can't get out of the AI. Parametricism, yes, because there was so much out there, and then it's easy to hybridize with organic form.
Yeah.
I would just say it's an invitation, first of all, for all of the designers, of course, fully embrace and go into AI and become expert users, not only with prompting, but also with feeding in sketches. And that's what we're doing. We actually, as an architect, I mean, we're working in larger teams, so we have more chance to use our strengths as an organization. We have 5 full-time AI researchers building tools, staying in touch with all the innovations, and training up network for each project, and building up tools like direct integration into Maya and Rhino, which we've done already. So we can do that. I don't know if the individual student can do that, but they certainly have more time and energy and knowledge. So I would just say, yes, it's a challenge, but for society as a whole, it is only a boon and benefit, because also for your own productivity, if you boost your own productivity with AI,
sure, yeah,
and that's the way it show up. That is wonderful, and I think competition is healthy.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And
okay.
Yeah, thank you, Patrik. So do you have more time for one more question, or we can just stop here?
If there is another question, I'm happy to address it. Yeah. Which one should I look at?
What are the root causes and determining factors of fashion design criticism based on social function perspective and not based on other perspectives?
Yeah. Well, as I said, so it's basically a criticism, not so much of an individual dress or individual collection. It could be a criticism of an oeuvre when you look at a sequence of collections, or as a whole system of fashion. Let's say what is currently on Vogue. If you look at, you can criticize London Fashion Week and say, and I've been looking at that and say, there's nothing in there for me. They still haven't discovered computational design sophistication. There's no sense of tectonism. Whereas, so it's behind. So that would be coming from a perspective which fundamentally, then also can say, from the social function of fashion to continuously renew, update, and increase the communication or information expression capacity, the expressive and expression capacity of the whole system of fashion. In recent years, each new season didn't bring so much advance. So there isn't enough new material which fits our era the way I would love to do it. That's why I got myself involved.
Right.
Because I'm unhappy with what's on offer. It seems too retro. That's my criticism. And retro means, from a sociological perspective, an insufficient expressive repertoire for society to express itself on the next level of its evolution.
Yeah, okay. So thank you, Patrik. Thank you
My
very
pleasure.
much.
I enjoyed this.
Thank you.
I hope you liked it too.
Why
So
don't
I
you
guess,
visit us in CAFA?
yeah, I would like to. I would like
to.
to look if I'm coming. There might be. I might have to go to Beijing or to China in December.
Okay.
Then I would pass by. Otherwise, with Yimeng, I mean, I'm gonna see, I guess, some of your student work in recent week in coming weeks, right?
Yeah. Please let us know if you want to come back to Beijing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Definitely. Yeah.
All
Great.
right.
Thank
Okay.
you,
Okay,
Patrik.
guys. Thank you so much.
Thank
And enjoy the
you.
rest of the day.
拜拜，
Thank
谢
you.
谢
Bye.
大
Bye
家。
bye.
因为 Patrik 等一下还有其他的会议，所以我们今天就暂时到这里结束了。如果大家有什么问题，也可以私下再联系我，然后我会来沟通。谢谢大家，Thank you。